What should we believe about climate change, the war in Ukraine and COVID vaccines? There are so many conspiracy theories and so much fake news online that it's hard to know what's true and what's just misinformation. Has it always been like this, or is there a particular problem today? Well, a new book written by former BBC journalist Graham Majin suggests it's all the fault of the baby boomer generation. The book's called Truthophobia, try saying that, How the Boomers Broke Journalism, and its author Graham Majin joins me now. So Graham, thank you for coming in.
It's great to be here, Adrian.
And let's kick off straight with the question of, well, who are the boomers?
Yeah, it's a very good question. The baby boomer generation is this enormously important generational cohort. In very crude demographic terms, they were born around about 1940 to 1955. It does get a little bit complex if we drill down into the detail, because there were actually different booms in the UK and the US at different times, so let's not go there now. But a hugely important cohort, largely or most importantly because of their sheer size. There are so many of them, and that meant that they basically changed everything. That they changed our taste in music, rock and roll, art. They changed education. Just about everything you can think of, the baby boomers came and turned it upside down and changed it. And they also did that with journalism. And,
yeah, well, this is the thing.
You're
saying they broke
truth.
But they broke journalism, you're saying? That's quite a claim, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of people be saying, well, in what way is it broken? Nothing wrong with journalism, it's fine. No, I think there are some very, very serious problems with journalism. I think if we step back a bit and kind of look at the bigger picture of the journalism we have today, what we see is very disturbing. We see basically two separate journalisms. In the book I call them official journalism and unofficial journalism. And we've got a situation where roughly half of the population in the UK and the US listen to, consume official journalism. And by that I mean stuff like the BBC, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, The Guardian, The Times, The Telegraph, etc., etc. What people refer to as the mainstream media. But approximately the other half, 50% of the population, don't trust and do not believe what they hear on the mainstream media, official journalism, and they get their information from unofficial sources, blogs, YouTube, social media, Substack accounts, and so on and so on. These are forming two completely different worlds with different information, different facts, different opinions. And these two epistemic worlds, I call them, have kind of moved apart and they trade insults. So that's why I think journalism's broken.
And I suppose, it is exactly that. It creates a real division in society because, to a certain extent, that dictates the world that people perceive. I mean, you refer in your book to impartiality in journalism and how that's been lost. Is impartiality really in decline? I mean, how do you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's broken. I think impartiality is dying. It's dying in real time. We're watching its death. If you talk to a lot of people, professional broadcasters on BBC and in the mainstream official journalism, they'll refer rather scathingly to impartiality as both sidesism. And they'll say, well, we can't have that. We don't want to hear people who disagree and who dissent from the official kind of consensus view. I think that's very, very disturbing. I mean, what's the opposite of both sidesism? Well, it's got to be one-sidism. So that's really what a lot of people today are arguing for, one-sided journalism, where we only hear one side about climate change, Ukraine, COVID, just about anything you can think of. What we get instead of debate and a diversity of opinion and views, what we get is narrative. We get the official narrative. And of course, on the other side of the divide, on the unofficial side, then we get the unofficial narratives. I think it's quite a bad situation.
Guess to a certain extent, that's embedded in journalism. We sort of state one side of the story, other side of the story, only time will tell type approach to journalism, and you're calling for more plurality of opinions, I guess, from that. But I mean, there was that issue where, to an extent, by trying to see the other side, the BBC ended up accused of giving a platform to people like Nigel Farage and Nick Robinson, who wouldn't have had a platform otherwise. Is that an issue as far as you see it?
Yeah, I think you probably mean Tommy Robinson.
Sorry, yes. Yeah. Who did I say?
Nick Robinson.
Nick Robinson. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nick Robinson.
Slightly different. No, but no, you're absolutely right. This is why impartiality seems to be in decline. And this is something I find very, very interesting. From the kind of philosophical point of view, and what we refer to as epistemology, which is really how do we know anything? How do we have knowledge? And what we seem to have at the moment, and I think this came from the Boomer generation, is a change in how we understand truth. And we understand truth as the consensus view of our tribe. People like us, good people, we believe in the narrative, and if it's questioned, we say yes, but experts who agree with us, our group all agree, I think it's a very dangerous situation.
In your book, you explain how journalism evolved from Victorian Liberal Journalism to Boomer journalism. That's the history of it, and people watching will be aware of how things have changed. Do you see that continually evolving? Does journalism really evolve, or does it stay the same underneath?
Absolutely, I think it does evolve over time, and it's very difficult for us to see that because we just see the journalism that exists in our own time, in our own society. But if you go back historically, very, very different. If you go back to, say, the 1660s, Charles II banned all journalism. There was only one official newspaper allowed in the country, in the UK. That censorship, that law expired at the end of the 1600s, and then as you move into the 18th century, you get this explosion of journalism. But spookily, 18th century journalism seems to be, to me, rather like the journalism we have today. It was divided into kind of warring camps with narratives, and there's our truth and your truth, everyone accusing each other of fake news. And it wasn't until the 19th century, the early 1800s, that the Victorians in Britain said, look, is there not a better way, rather than this kind of these tribal narratives and all this fake news? How about we try and objectively, impartially establish what's true? How about we kind of inquire into the truth? And so it was the Victorians in this country who established this Victorian liberal type of journalism with impartiality, distinction between fact and opinion. And that was really the dominant mode of journalism right up until the 1960s, 70s, even perhaps into the 80s. And then things started to change quite quickly. And that, in my view, is because the Boomer generation had reached positions of power and authority in newsrooms and were able to change journalism into a completely different type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And should climate deniers and anti-vaxxers be allowed in the first place? And we see them everywhere. They're fascinating characters, and all this human interest picks them up. But should we see them on television in the first place?
Well, in my opinion, yes, we should, because you have to remember that there is this view that's widespread, and I think getting more and more widespread, that we mustn't have these people on. We must deny a platform to these deniers and the hate speech and the anti-vaxxers, and so we just have this narrow official narrative that can't be challenged, and it seems to imply that we're infallible, that our view is absolutely right, and the people over there are absolutely wrong, and we mustn't hear from them. But all that does is it just widens the gulf, because the people on the other side of the divide are saying exactly the same thing. They're saying, well, we're right and you're wrong. And I think, it doesn't bode well. Historically, that kind of divide has never worked out well for societies where you have these warring tribes that don't talk to each other. And the motto of the BBC is nation shall speak peace unto nation, which means that, hey, we may disagree, but let's at least keep talking to each other, because that way we come closer, and it's better than the alternative, which is hostility and conflict.
So let's communicate, let's keep everyone together, let's keep talking. All sounds Wonderful. So if you needed to sum everything up into that neat sentence, because your book is on Amazon and can be bought.
Oh yes.
What would you say?
It's available worldwide. I think you've summed it up really well. I mean, let's keep talking to each other, and let's not fall back into this kind of medieval way of thinking where we are the righteous tribe and we're going to burn the witches. People that are different to us are wrong and evil. As you said, let's just keep talking. We're all fallible. We can all learn from each other. Let's just keep talking.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much for coming in to talk to us today, Graham, about your book. We do have just a little bit longer. What's the final conclusion as you get to the end of the book? Is that it? The
spoiler
communication?
Alert. Spoiler. Yeah. Well,
Start at the back.
I think it would be nice for me to say, well, I've got some great answers to all these problems. I'm afraid it's much more complex than that. I suppose if there is a simple conclusion, it's that we get the journalism we deserve. So it's a question really historically of what do people in society want? What sort of journalism do we really want?
Well, what a way to end. Absolutely. We get the journalism we deserve. So in the modern world, with the modern leaders that we have, perhaps we have had exactly that, the journalism we deserve. Thank you very much for watching today. I'm sure there's lots of things to think about there. Join us again next week when we'll be discussing some more interesting facts from the world at large. But for now, from me and the team, goodbye.